I've said for years that Speed Champions is my favourite LEGO theme, but that doesn't mean they're perfect. I think they tend to focus too much on supercars, race cars, muscle cars, and definitely Formula 1 cars, to a point of lacking variety and being almost one note. And so in this video, I'm going to look at 12 set ideas that I think would be perfect for 2026, using a variety of different classes of cars that I think would be appropriate for and expand the Speed Champions catalogue. I'm also going to split this list into realistic options that I can see LEGO actually doing, and my personal wish list of cars that I just love but don't really believe we'll ever see in the theme. Starting off, I think we need two mid-level, relatively affordable sports cars, like the kind that a normal person might actually be able to afford, as opposed to like the Lamborghinis, Ferraris, or McLarens that we've been getting. There are loads of options for this, but I think the most obvious locked-in choice is a Mazda MX-5. Probably in red. It's like the enthusiast sports car, like it's such a staple. I'm honestly kind of surprised they haven't made it yet. For my own list here, I low-key kind of prefer the Abarth 124 Spider, which is just a reskinned MX-5, and while I would love to see that in the white and black color scheme, I think 90% of people would prefer the Mazda, so that's just probably what LEGO would go for. The second sports car on this list is a bit trickier because there are loads of good choices. The Audi TT RS, Toyota GT or GR86, or like the BMW Z4 would all be decent shouts. But I think my choice for the second sports car on this list would be a Lotus Elise, or Lotus Exige, because it's got a recognizable shape, interesting, more compact size, and especially if you go for the earlier models in dark green with that yellow racing stripe, like they did with the Avaya, I just think you'd be cooking. In my list here, we'd get an Alfa Romeo 4C, but I think Kobe have the license for that car brand, so unless it's a non-exclusive license, Alfa Romeo are sadly off the table. Same thing with the Abarth, actually, and Lancia, and probably Maserati, which kinda sucks, but what can you do? The next two slots I want to dedicate to what I would call weird cars, similar in vibe to that Top Fuel dragster in the Dodge Duo set from the 2021 wave. You could call the almost windowless McLaren Elva or like the Lamborghini Vision concept car weird in a sense, but vibes wise I think they still feel in line with the other supercars and hypercars that we've been getting. So for the first weird car, I'd love to see something like a Morgan three-wheeler. It would be a super unique addition to the theme, and I would just love to see how they approach designing a car with only 3 wheels and such a unique shape. So I'll put that in my dream wish list because I just don't think Morgan as a brand has the pulling power that LEGO would want to make into a set. The more realistic choice for this slot, although less obvious in its gimmick and relatively unknown as a brand, would be a McMurdy Spearling. This is a track car that only weighs about 1,000 kilos, but as a result of multiple giant fans that cling it to the road like a vacuum, it has 2,000 kilos of downforce. And as a result of that and its 1,000 horsepower, it moves around like it doesn't look real. Like, look at this clip from its recent TopGear hot lap. It genuinely looks like a low-budget car chase from a movie where they just sped up the footage. As if that wasn't enough, the company also put out a video where they drove it completely upside down, which is something we theoretically knew was possible for years. Like, Formula 1 cars produce more downforce than they weigh, so theoretically it could drive upside down, but we never got to actually see it tested in real life until now. It's just really cool, and I think the look of the car just suits a LEGO set perfectly too. And for the second weird car slot, I think I'd actually put this in a duo pack alongside a more conventional Speed Champions car, because 2 entire sets dedicated to this kind of novelty just feels like a bit too much. In this case, I think I'd pair something like a Ford Fiesta ST with an electric Ford Supervan. The Supervan feels like it'd be a really unique build with the exact fun vibe that I'm looking for, but I think you gotta throw in the Fiesta to just sell this idea as a package. Plus I think Speed Champions needs the extra hot hatchback representation wherever possible, so it'd just be a very welcome inclusion. I'd also like to see more representation for sports sedans in this theme. Like, 4-door cars can be fast too, and it's a type of car that we basically never see in this theme. And if you're gonna pick a sports sedan to make into a standalone set, I think the obvious choice is a BMW M5. If they decide to do so, LEGO will probably just make the newest version because that's just kind of what they did for last year's Duo Pack. Lots of people would probably prefer the E34 or E28 instead, so take your pick. Again, my personal preference would be different here. I'd much prefer to see an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio myself, so that's what I'd put on my list. But again, they probably just won't touch that one. Similar to what I did for the Ford Supervan, I felt like I needed to throw a second sports sedan slot into a duo pack to help it along. So for this one, I took an Audi RS7 and paired it with an updated Audi R8. I think the Audi R8 is in desperate need of an 8-stud wide redesign. Like, that 6-stud wide design is pretty horrible, to be honest. Like, you can barely recognize it even knowing what it is. So I figured I'd just throw it in with an RS7 here to knock out both cars in one. Especially since I don't think the RS7 has the same aura as an M5 would to convince people to buy it on its own. The next type of car I think LEGO should make would be one of those ones that are mostly track focused, because if there's any type of car that embodies the spirit of Speed Champions, it would be the ones designed for speed and fun on a track. I think something like a Caterham 7 or a KTM Crossbow, ideally the earlier ones without the windscreen, could be great additions to the theme. But I think my best choice for a car in this class would be an Aerial Atom. LEGO would most likely do the 4R since it's newer, more relevant, blah blah blah, but if it was me, I'd go for the black, red and gold V8 version from 2010. Either way, I would just love to see how they design and build that, like, I guess, scaffolding frame that's in place of the doors. They could even make this a duo pack with the Nomad if they really wanted to. The next two sets on this list I've given to the car class that I think Speed Champions are in the most desperate need of, which are hot hatchbacks. I can't emphasize enough how much I love this kind of car, and so the first slot I'd give to either the Mini John Cooper Works or the Golf GTI, just because they're such staples of the hot hatchback class that I think they'd both do really well as individual sets, but maybe that's just me thinking in terms of safe bets LEGO would actually do. A Honda Civic Type R, Renault 5, or especially the Toyota GR Yaris would also be great choices, albeit maybe less of a safe bet. The second hot hatchback slot here is where I go really wild here, because my dream Speed Champion set would be an Abarth Duo Pack with a 595 paired with the newer 600E, which I also think is kind of cool. But again, I think Kobe potentially have the exclusive rights to the Abarth license, so while my dream lineup would be a Mini John Cooper Works paired with an Abarth Duo Pack, I think a more realistic mix would be a Golf GTI paired with a Mini Duo Pack with either the John Cooper Works paired with something like a Countryman, or maybe just a straight up remake of the Duo Pack from 2019, but with larger 8-stud wide cars. Although, a Toyota Duo Pack with the GR Yaris and a Hilux could be even better if they decided they didn't want to just remake the same set again. The next two slots I want to give to late 2000 supercars, the kind of Top Gear era supercars that I almost have nostalgic feeling towards somehow. And you can fill in the slot with countless great cars, like the Mercedes McLaren SLR, Ferrari Enzo, Ford GT, Carrera GT, or even like a Lexus LFA or Aston Martin DB9. I'd love to see a Bugatti Veyron, but I'll admit that may be too similar in vibe to the Chiron or the new Cento Dieci. And so with all that, my dream car for this lot would be a Pagani Zonda Sync Roadster. Although I feel like if LEGO were to revisit an older Pagani model, they'd most likely do something based on the Zonda R. And my logic for saying that is purely vibes based, like I have nothing to back that up. But it just feels like something they'd do, you know? I'd also love to see a duo pack here with some supercars from this era, and I think a great pairing would be like a Lamborghini Gallardo / Murcielago set. I considered putting the Aventador here, but then I realized that this would essentially be a version of the new Lamborghini Geopack, but with both cars older by one iteration. And I was a little bit concerned that the Gallardo and the Aventador might be a little bit too similar design-wise. Maybe because the new set is so similar in concept, a more realistic choice might be like a Jaguar F-Type / DX75 Geopack, although letting LEGO make that would probably be too cool of a move for Jaguar these days. And last, but definitely not least, I have an idea here that I think is thematically perfect and almost makes too much sense not to do, and that's in some way resurrecting and remaking the Hypercar Holy Trinity, but in the 8-stud wide format. These three cars were covered a lot on Top Gear and actually kickstarted both the Grand Tour and the Speed Champions theme way back in 2015. And frankly, I would just love to see them remake this trio with the freedom of the 8-stud wide designs. LEGO just last year put out the large-scale Technic McLaren P1, so they haven't totally moved on and forgotten about them. But this does still feel overly optimistic, so I'll just leave them on my list. What I think is more likely to happen is them releasing sets based on the new Holy Trinity, with the Ferrari F80, McLaren W1, and the Porsche Mission X. There's a kind of nice parody happening there where you've got like the old Holy Trinity for the 6-stud wide and then the new Holy Trinity for the 8-stud wide cars. It's just feels nice to me. Like, am I the only one that thinks that? I do imagine they'll cover these new cars at some point, like they're kind of too big of a deal not to. But yeah, my dream would be that older trio personally. And with all that, we have my final realistic list for LEGO Speed Champions in 2026 and my ideal, probably not gonna happen wish list. Let me know if there's anything I missed, or maybe just list out some cars you want to see next year. But yeah, thanks for watching and farewell.